Hi, welcome to Spiritual Connection. I'm your host, Katie Augustyn. So I'm a transformation coach, I'm an energy healer, I'm a shamanic practitioner, and I'm a spiritual leader. And I'm also the head of the Transformation Center CT, which is based in Westport, Connecticut. So we just recently opened the center, and it's a place where we can come together for trainings, for workshops, for satsang. We're going to be doing that once a month. So everyone is welcome to come and just partake of whatever's going on, and especially those of you who are beginners on your spiritual journey. We'd love to see you there. So there's a lot to learn and experience in everything that we do. So as many of you know, the Spiritual Connection show is about connecting us with each other, as well as allowing you to connect more fully with your spiritual nature. And in addition, you get to learn about others' spiritual journeys when I have my guest. Okay, and by doing that, you can learn more about yourself. So we're all about connection and supporting you on your path. So we're glad you're joining us tonight. So tonight, my guest is Batya Diamond. Welcome to the show,
Thanks,
Batya.
Katie.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. So I'm just going to do a little introduction about you since our viewers don't really know you yet.
Great.
Okay. So Batya is a singer-songwriter, which you're going to find out more about later in the show. She brought a special treat for us tonight, which I'm very excited about. She's also a teacher, a spiritual leader, and an activist. Are we going to hear about all of those things tonight?
It all fits together.
Okay, cool. And also, I want you to know that later this year, she will be ordained as a Kohenet, which is a Hebrew Priestess. So that's very cool. And you'll share more about that as well.
For sure.
Cool. So before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey thus far, like how you got to where you are now? We're really interested in that.
When I look back, it really started when I was 12 years old. I mean, I was connected spiritually, mostly through music. I would love to sing, and I felt spirit in singing and playing the piano. And I'm Jewish, and so growing up, I did go to a Hebrew day school, and I was immersed in Jewish learning and singing. And when I was 12 years old and went to become a bat mitzvah, which is a rite of passage for a 12-year-old Jewish girl or a 13-year-old boy, where you get to read from the Holy Scrolls, and they wouldn't let me because I was a girl. And this was in the early 1970s when feminism was really, it was that wave of feminism was happening, and I felt very wounded by it. I was very angry, and I had no recourse at those days. Then later, fast forward, 30 years later, when I gave birth to my daughter, and my mother-in-law wanted to have this wonderful baby naming ceremony, and I was like, no, that's not for me. I don't believe in any of this. There's no place for, women's spirituality, so I thought back then. And when my son was born a few years later, we knew we would have the ritual bris for him, but I had to really look and say, wait a minute, why am I doing this? What's in it? What's my connection? And I found some amazing books that had been written between the time I was 12 and the time I was in my early 30s. On Being a Jewish Feminist was the first one that I found, or She Who Dwells Within, which talks about the feminine divine. And those reignited my search, but it mostly came out then starting with music, because all of a sudden I reconnected to my love of the Hebrew language and of singing and prayers, and I started then to write songs in the feminine language, which Hebrew is a language like French or Spanish, which it's either masculine or feminine, the nouns. And so changing them around and playing with that. So I did that for a while. I actually went back to school. I went to rabbinical school for a couple of years, but it didn't stick. Again, it was very structured and very based on rules that men made up thousands of years ago. And at some point I was like, this is not the relationship I have with the divine.
I see.
And then shortly after that came through my email box an invitation to join a group of Jewish feminists with a program called Kohenet, the Hebrew Priestess Institute. And it was like one of those things that I just like, wow, look what happened in my mailbox. And it was like this gift that came to me. And I found other seekers like myself. There is a book called The Hebrew Priestess, which is written by a rabbi, PhD, who's done a lot of research anthropologically and historically. and a shaman, and together they created this institute, this teaching. And the gist of it is what Judaism would have looked like if women had brought the ideals to fruition. So it's very earth-centered and nature-centered and seasonal, and looking at women's bodies as holy as opposed to ways in which the Bible might prescribe things, for women or against women. And once I started attending that was 3 years ago, I really started fully flourishing in my spirituality, not just being here in Connecticut doing my teaching. My main work is tutoring bar and bat mitzvah students, talking about like coming full circle and healing in that way.
Perfect.
So I teach and tutor them, but I also now have my voice in that, and I have a collective community across the country and around the world of women who are sort of on their own path, but part of this network of Hebrew priestesses.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea that even existed. Yeah, so you have your own center called Shaviti Space. Is that correct?
Shaviti Space.
Shaviti Space. And what is the meaning of that term?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, it started as the Wilton Jewish Center. So that's the name I've been working under for the past 20 years. But then I moved to Norwalk, and so I needed to sort of shift that a little bit. Shaviti is from one of the Psalms, and it means I place before me. And it's in connection with the divine name. I place the divine name before me always. And it's sort of like a little shorthand to help me remember to be mindful of the divine and to bring that energy in.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So and through Shaviti Space, I do rituals, not just Jewish, because one thing I've realized is that, Jewish people will find me, but often there are so many people who have different spiritual backgrounds, different faith traditions. And they're also looking for a way in as a woman, usually, because they don't necessarily feel connected to their faith. And so I'll do interfaith rituals, whether it's for the summer solstice, for example, or for a new moon. And so I'm branching out to not just Jewish things.
Okay, so it's more like a global spiritual kind of
unity.
Unity.
Right, 'cause we all come from one divine source.
Well, exactly. I mean, yes, we're all one.
Right, we just have different pathways to it, and so this is exploring pathways to meditation and song.
Yeah, right. So what I was going to ask you is I know ritual is very important to you in general, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit and why that is so?
I like that question a lot. For me, it's really about concretizing and sort of making my divine channel really present in my life. So having rituals on a daily basis, whether it's saying certain prayers or having an altar with divine images that I can contemplate, honoring my ancestors in certain ways, having rituals around that. Traditionally in Judaism, we light candles on Friday night and say blessings, so Friday night becomes a sacred time. Lighting candles, connecting with the traditions of my ancestors. I have my great-grandmother's candlesticks that she brought with her from Czechoslovakia. And so I feel very close to my ancestors and their traditions, realizing that they had such different lives and such different rituals.
So what does a ritual bring to us? What does it allow us to bring as just in general for all of us?
Well, I think in part it's the structure. It's about creating sacred time and sacred space. So putting aside the ordinary, saying, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes, like meditation, where you take time to actually go through certain steps, starting at one point and imagining, a journey along the way that allows you to go from one emotional or spiritual place to another. It's hard to.
I think I see what you mean. It allows us in a way to be with ourselves, yet out of ourselves.
Nice.
Seems to me.
And using symbolic objects. For example, I often use earth, water, air, fire. So there would be stones, a bowl of water.
That's great.
Maybe a bell to symbolize air, and then candles, and using those in either all of them at a time, or just saying, well, today I really want to ground in my earth energy, so I'm going to hold these stones and and do some meditation with them.
Yeah, so really connect to those elements, which are part of us, but we seldom think about it in our day-to-day life.
Right, but they're so available, which is great. Again, just breathing, right? Just breathing. We're connecting to air. We take in the spirit, and we share the universal spirit through our breath. So that's the easiest way.
Yeah. So those are the daily rituals. And then you have your, like you said, the summer solstice, other things. Do you celebrate those at your center, or how does that work?
So for now, the center is my home. So I'm mindful about what sort of energy I bring into my home and clearing it afterwards. I like to bring in people who I know or friends of friends, but I am branching out. I do other rituals. For example, I'll rent out public spaces from time to time if it's going to be a large group.
Okay, great.
And yes. And now that I'm expecting to be ordained, goddess willing, in August, and I sort of feel like there's a real kickoff for me. I'm also releasing a new album of songs, and so I sort of feel like as I'm approaching that time, once I receive my title, then it's really going to be the opening for me to step into a new phase of service.
Absolutely. That will definitely open up some things for you. I have that feeling.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what have you been doing to prepare for this ordination?
I didn't know if you meant for this. Or
no. No.
Well, it's a 3-year training program. So there's a lot of work, a lot of learning. The rubric that Kohenet uses are the 13 pathways of the priestess. So, for example, there's the seeker, the prophetess, the mourning woman. And so over the course of the 3 years, we really look at those. They're called netivot in Hebrew. It means pathways. We look at the different pathways in ourselves of how we each are the seeker or the priestess. And in any situation, where my spirituality not is challenged, where I need to sort of rise to the occasion for something. Okay, say, well, what does this situation need now? It needs, a mother, or it needs a healer, and so to use those archetypes.
Okay, so that aspect of yourself comes to the forefront in that situation.
And in combination too. To do that, and part of what my project was for heading towards ordination was creating a series of meditative chants. And so I took certain Jewish themes and I wrote chants, just brief chants that are now turning into beautiful compositions and beautiful productions with my producer, David Morgan. Got to give him a shout out from Reading, who does his magic too. So
is that the album that you're creating? Or
yes.
Is that, okay.
Yes.
And what's it called?
I don't know yet. I have ideas, but when it's finished, it'll tell me.
Yeah, right, exactly. Thank
when
you.
I hear all of the tracks in particular order, and then I'll get a sense of the flow. It's probably connected to Shiviti, because the idea of invoking and inviting meditation opportunities and a chance to go to another place through the chants.
Okay, so do you envision it mainly being used for meditation purposes, or?
Meditation and ritual as well. Or prayer. It also substitutes, instead of doing traditional prayers, some of the things I've written are, like I said, feminized language of traditional prayers, so it's a little more accessible in certain ways.
So will people chant along with the chants? Will it become that type of a chant?
That's one possibility, or it's a learning tool, so people can learn it, and then when we come together as a group, people will know it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I envisioned. So maybe at the beginning or during a program that you have.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we, like at satsang that I held in my space last night, one of the things we did was chanting, and it's really transcendent, I think, the chanting experience. Really something that you don't get in any other modality.
Yes.
That I have experienced. I shouldn't say that definitively, but for me, because it's sort of new to me within the last several years.
Well, music for me is it's all vibrations, and our whole being are those vibrations, and how we are in the world are our vibrations. Yeah. So the music can help shift things for us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, do you have a song that you would like to share with us tonight?
I do have a song. It's not a chant because I wasn't ready to unveil those yet.
Okay.
But I have a song. It's called Walk On. And I actually wrote this a few years ago for the Relay for Life. It was inspired by two friends who are breast cancer survivors. And I have my little cheat sheet just so I don't.
Of course.
Yeah, it's called Walk On.
Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you for inviting me. The rhythm of life isn't always smooth and steady. Sometimes you stumble and find a small stone in your shoe. So you gather your strength, shake yourself off, and keep going, 'cause it's all that you can do. Walk on before your life is done. You'll travel many roads and many miles. Walk on, from darkness till the dawn. Then you'll know that you have more than just survived. You stop, throw the stone, watch the ripples in the water. They remind you of the circles of the people that you love. And if you've got someone who really cares about you, then you're lucky, 'cause you know the road gets rough. But you walk on before your life is done. You'll travel many roads and many miles. Walk on, from twilight till the morning. Then you'll know that you have more than just survived. Though the body may be broken, the spirit carries far. Makes that sacred journey and learns to love the scars. Walk on before your life is done. Travel many roads and many miles. Walk on, no matter what befalls you. You'll know that you have more than just survived. You'll know that you have more than just survived. The rhythm of life isn't always smooth and steady.
Wow, that was amazing. It's very touching, and also inspiring. It's moving. I was moved. I mean, that's great, Batya. So that's so. Have you recorded that particular song?
Yes.
Yeah?
I do have that recorded. Maybe I'll throw it up on the website. So
that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah. I think people would enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So I'm looking forward to seeing or hearing the chants when they come out.
Great.
When do you think that will be?
I think I'm going to do my launch on the summer solstice. So I'm expecting that by June it'll all be done. Maybe sooner. I may have a little sneak peek available before then.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, I would love to be included in that celebration or whatever it is that you
Wonderful.
have planned.
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
And you can
exciting.
let people know through your website, because we will have that up on the screen, all your contact info.
Great.
So people can follow you. You have a Facebook presence, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
About all your events and stuff. Yeah, well, that's
Facebook,
awesome.
Instagram, whatever.
Yeah, it's so interesting how it's so much easier now to connect with people that we find interesting or find something in common with, or that we want to meet. Or
it's a double-edged sword. It's a challenge too, because there are times when I've thought of like, oh, I'm so tired of Facebook, and I don't I don't necessarily always feel safe. But it's also the easiest way to get the word out and to connect with others.
Right. And I find that the group that we belong to, the TLC network group, that's where I've met a lot of the people that have been guests on the show. And do you participate in a lot of their activities?
I do. Whenever I'm in town, I'm definitely there on Tuesday mornings.
Oh yes, right.
And
for the networking breakfast.
Other events as well. Yes.
Yeah. They seem to have a lot going on right now.
think it's probably time for me to schedule something to do as well.
Right. So you have things at your at the Shaviti space that you offer?
Yes. I don't have anything on the calendar at the moment. I just finished, I did an event, as you said, you did an event last night. I did an event last night.
Right.
I did a women's Seder for 45
why don't you tell us about that?
So it's the 4th year in a row. A colleague and I, my colleague Susan Cutler, my dear friend and colleague Susan, we lead a women's community Seder, which is a traditional Passover meal, but it's not traditional and it's not on Passover. It's sort of like a preview for women to read from a different text, to have some feminist stories, things they can take back to their family Seders, some customs, some readings, and people love it. And it's not just for Jewish women, because the story of liberation and justice is a story for everyone.
Yeah, it's universal.
Right? So it's a well-told story.
Okay.
So we did that.
Where did you have that?
In the Brubeck room of the Wilton Library, which to me is really sacred space. It's so beautiful, and it's on a court. It's got the courtyard and just wonderful lighting.
It's beautiful there.
There. Yes.
And that's available for people to
rent.
To rent. Right.
To rent.
Yeah.
Yes, but they have, it's really lovely.
So that's great. So what do you have coming up? You said there's nothing on the schedule right now, or?
So I'm getting ready again. I'm finishing up the album. That's the first thing, and then planning the solstice event.
Okay.
And there may be other things in the summer. Not quite sure yet. I often do new moon celebrations. I'm currently also teaching an introduction to Kabbalah class. So Kabbalah is ancient Jewish mysticism. Well, it's current as well. And it's also, there are so many ways through Kabbalah. It means received wisdom, and it's often hidden, but there are ways using either Hebrew letters or contemplation of certain letters or objects, or just studying certain passages and understanding them at a deeper level. So I started a class, the first time I'm teaching it, which is very exciting.
So you're creating the curriculum and everything?
Yes, the curriculum. The curriculum creates itself.
I see.
Because it's about the people who show up and what the people are seeking and what they want to learn. And there are some basics. There's some basic, again, the symbolism. And so we learn about the basic symbolism. The 4 worlds, again, the earth, water, air, and fire is an example of 4 worlds in Judaism, as in many other cultures. And we have the 5 levels of the soul, and the 10 spheres, the 10 attributes of the divine. So I could go on.
No, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, I have heard of it. I have to say I've heard of the Kabbalah, but I really know nothing about it. So maybe our audience would be interested in a little tidbit.
The main texts were written in the 1300s, a little bit later, maybe some a little earlier, 800s, 1300s. And they were all loosely based on the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses. So they're based on taking verses from the Torah and looking at the meaning in the spaces. Because there are so many things that are, even if you just look at the first 3 words, in the beginning, Bereshit bara, it basically means with beginnings was created. And then what was created? Elohim, which could be the divine. Like maybe the beginnings created the divine. So it sort of like flips things around and just creates different ways of looking at it. And it's been hidden, and it's kept hidden a lot because it's sort of perceived as dangerous, right? If people start really manipulating these texts and questioning, it's threatening. And it also can be dangerous, as with any spiritual journey, that you need to be grounded and you need generally to have a guide. So it's protection.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's great. I mean, that's a little window into what's possible in that. I mean, it's almost like you're kind of reinterpreting different passages, and seeking other
going another different layers,
deeper
levels. And the Hebrew letters for me are also magical. It said part of the teaching is that the world was created with the divine letters, with the Hebrew letters. And so manipulating words is an act of creation.
I love that. So it has very little to do with concrete knowledge. It's more about what's underneath the whole everything, really.
So the one thing I would say is that it starts with the Bible. So it always sort of starts from that grounded place,
Okay.
as in most Judaism. And then,
Yeah.
for example, my teacher, the rabbi who created, one of the creators of Kohenet, in her book she explores what's called the Hebrew Priestess. There are instances in the Bible or in ancient texts where they might mention a woman or someone who had a role somewhere, and then you say, wait a minute, there were women at the ancient temple? Like, what was going on there? What were they doing? And their stories were never expounded upon. And so now we have the opportunity to do that, to go back the same way that men did hundreds or thousands of years ago, to say, oh, this sentence in the Torah means this. Like, okay. And we sort of took that on for years.
Yeah, right. You just accepted it as
Right.
that's how it was. Oh, that's really interesting. Well, I'd love to hear more about that after you get started.
Yes, yes.
So do you anticipate starting in the fall, or?
I have to see. So we're
after you're ordained.
We've
and
had
everything.
right. Yes, after. Yes, so probably in the fall. That would probably be a good time. I find anything I do around here, scheduling is the hardest part of making something happen, because people are so busy. You know, I planned this first course that I'm doing. It's daytime, and of course everyone is like, well, what about an evening class? I'm like, okay, I'll come up with an evening class, but you know.
I find the exact same thing, and if you have an evening class, it's like, well, can't you do a morning class?
Right.
So I end up kind of doing both, because you do want to reach as many people as possible. It's not that you want to please everybody, but you don't want to leave people out.
Right.
If you can avoid
Evenings are not my best time, as I mentioned to you about coming here tonight.
I know. I was happy that you could make it. Yeah, I wish we could record during the day, but
6 a.m. is much better for me.
Yeah,
but,
a lot of people.
But I'm interested. As I said, I'm curious to see for myself what opens up after I become ordained.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait for that. Yeah. Congratulations in advance.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're just about out of time. Is there any last words you'd like to share tonight? Or?
Gratitude. It's always about gratitude.
Yeah.
This opportunity for us to have this conversation, and for me to play my song, and for the breath that we breathe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. And I love that song. I was really glad that you thought of doing that.
That's great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, super. All right, so maybe we'll have you back after you're ordained, and you can tell us
I'd love to.
how that was. Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, super. All right, well, thanks again for being here, and thank you to our audience for coming to watch Spiritual Connection, and we hope to see you on the next episode. Good night and blessings. Take care.
Diamond